At a time we are dealing with numerous challenges in our nation, from the killings of young persons to the economic turmoil that we are facing, to numerous and various problems that the nation Kenya faces, I am here to give you unfiltered insight into these issues, one by one, as we delve into the details of these occurrences. My name is Chris Kushu, and this is my unfiltered insights. When Lee Kuan Yew took power in 1965, after Singapore had gained its independence from Malaysia, or was basically expelled from Malaysia, he and the government he was leading and the party he belonged to had a vision to transform the island into a business hub, into an industrialized island, and for Singapore to become a first world country. He looked at the problems inwards that faced Singapore, and they came up with a 30 to 50 year plan to transform Singapore to a first world country. Lee Kuan Yew and his government knew that one of the major hindrances that would drag them back and cut down on the gains that they would make into the transformation of Singapore was corruption. Because where corruption thrives, development slumbers. He turned his attention to an already existing institution, the Corrupt Practices Investigations Bureau, that was existent even during the British rule of the island. He cleaned up the bureau, removed the corrupt officers, and gave it a completely new look. He knew this was not enough. He went to Parliament, ensured that the Corrupt Practices Investigations Bureau in Singapore was given broad powers to investigate corruption. And since the political goodwill was there, it had the powers to investigate up to the highest levels of government. He knew the battle did not end at investigations. So the Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew ensured that Parliament also passed tough laws to punish those found culpable of corruption. The laws were tightened even more, and it gave teeth to the Corruption Investigation Bureau. The Bureau went after all corrupt officers. In some cases, even ministers in Lee Kuan Yew's cabinet were arrested, were jailed, were fined. Those found culpable were not only jailed and fined, and heavy fines, by the way, that ensured you may never even recover financially. But they were also ridiculed in public. They were also mocked in public. A corruption scandal in Singapore ended careers, literally. And as time progressed, as Lee Kuan Yew, the Prime Minister of Singapore and the founding father of Singapore, ensured that Singapore continued to enact very tough laws that were very tough on corruption. With time, the corrupt practices fizzled out of Singapore, and the corruption began to die down. And over time, Singapore had one of the most corruption-free governments in the world. He had cleaned the government by ensuring that the agency responsible for corruption investigations and prosecutions was strengthened, was made independent, was cleaned up, and that it was doing the job that it was supposed to do. Let's turn the camera inwards to our case. The very government that tells us of a story of how Singapore moved from a developing country to a first world country in one generation, and the very government that tells us that it wants to move us from a third world to a first world country, is a government that encourages corruption. A government that appoints cabinet secretaries of questionable character. A government that appoints cabinet secretaries who even had murder cases by their time of appointment. If the EACC was working properly, those persons would never have seen the day in light in any office. If the country or the government we have was serious about turning Kenya into Singapore, those persons will never have been considered to be cabinet secretaries. We have even PSs, we have government officials. We have even had government sponsoring candidates in elections who are known to be corrupt. Candidates whom EACC has said should be in jail. Our very own agency that is meant to fight corruption and eliminate it from our society has no teeth, has no power. It is independent on paper. But the political actors of this country do not allow the EACC to breathe and do not allow it the independence it deserves. Majority of our members of parliament are corrupt. Majority of the persons who serve in government are corrupt to the core. Majority of the persons who seek leadership in this country are corrupt. While corruption broke careers, while even rumors of corruption in Singapore broke careers and ensured you'll never get anywhere near public service, in Kenya, it launches political careers and successful ones. We have had persons elected as governors after they had been accused of stealing billions of Kenya's shillings from the public coffers. We have had persons who were in charge of state agencies, who were in charge of parastatals, and ran them to the ground through corrupt practices and encouragement of corrupt practices, and practices like nepotism, becoming governors of counties in this country, being put in charge of billions, being put in charge of the health of millions, being put in charge of agriculture that affects millions, being put in charge of the very livelihoods of millions. If we reward corruption with a seat at the table where government resources are shared, how then can Kenya become a Singapore? We all now see how much of a mirage the Singapore narrative and dream is. It is not achievable with the levels of corruption that thrive in this country. If a police officer can stop me by the road and does not write me up to go to court, but instead asks me for a bribe, and that bribe, he's not the only one who consumes it, or she's not the only one who consumes it, but that bribe and those monies that are collected go all the way to the highest levels of that department, then we have a serious problem. Because number one, among the chief obstacles that we have if we want to move to a first world country is corruption. And it is that Kenyan corruption is deeply embedded in the society. It's not only the leaders, it's Kenyans themselves. We are corrupt to the core. And even in churches today and other religious establishments, you will hear of accusations of corruption, places that corruption should not even be mentioned, but it exists there as well. And the very henchmen who make the final decisions on behalf of the government are corrupt to the core and are the major drivers of corruption. How then can Kenya become the Singapore of Africa, while all this rotten and bad cultural behavior of being corrupt to the core thrives in this nation? Until Chapter 6 of our Constitution becomes a reality and stops being written on paper, until when EACC is enabled to do its job, until when EACC is given the independence it deserves and it is also cleaned up and laws are enacted to heavily punish the corrupt persons in this country who previously held positions and who currently hold positions, until when Chapter 6 can prevent you to even become a candidate in an election, until Chapter 6 can prevent you from holding office even after being appointed, we will never be the Singapore of Africa. That is my unfiltered insight.